She'll listen closely. When darkness wraps the world and dreams begin to stir, you've arrived at the right place. Welcome to Between Dreams and Shadows, the sanctuary of stories that live between sleep and the unknown. Here, every tale is more than a story. It's a portal to hidden worlds, forgotten secrets, whispers from beyond, and shadows that speak as your eyes begin to close. If you're drawn to mysteries, haunting legends, and stories that send shivers down your spine, this channel is your new nighttime ritual. Before we begin, I invite you to become part of this growing nightbound community. Subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a tale. New stories drop regularly, always under the veil of night. Like this video if you enjoy that chill before sleep. It helps this channel grow and lets me bring you deeper, darker stories. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had a strange dream? Or felt something watching in the dark? Your experience might inspire the next tale now. Take a deep breath, turn off the lights, leave the world behind, and get ready to drift between dreams and shadows. Setting the atmosphere was the kind of silence that wasn't truly quiet. Lena Cartwright lived alone at the edge of Hawthorne Lane, in a small timber-framed house that had once belonged to her grandmother. The house creaked like it breathed. The walls seemed too thin for comfort, and at night, the darkness hung heavy, like the air refused to move. Her days were ordinary. She taught music lessons in town, waved politely to her neighbors, and returned home before dusk. She liked solitude, or so she believed. But nights had begun to feel different. Not frightening exactly, just wrong. It began with the stillness. Not the peaceful kind, but a strange, oppressive kind that made even her breaths sound too loud. She noticed it most around 2 a.m., when the last cars from the highway were long gone and the world slipped into some deeper slumber. Then came the ticking. Her grandmother's antique clock in the hallway had never been reliable. It would stall, then jump forward, sometimes skipping entire hours. But lately, without fail, it would chime once at exactly 2:47 a.m. Only once. A sound so soft it could be mistaken for a trick of the mind unless you were already awake. Already waiting. Lena told herself it was coincidence. Just a mechanical hiccup. Nothing to worry about. But each night, at that exact minute, she found herself lying awake, not daring to move. She couldn't explain why she started checking the time, but her phone would always glow to 47 a.m., as if time itself paused for something unseen to arrive. And then, nothing. Nothing she could see, at least. But something was different. The air would shift subtly, like someone had opened a door far away. Her ears would pop, and for a brief moment, every hair on her body would rise. As if bracing for something that never came, she began to dread sleep. Not because of nightmares, but because she knew, when her eyes closed, something would begin to watch. She couldn't prove it, couldn't hear or see anything, but she felt it. There's a certain kind of fear that doesn't scream. It just waits. And at 2:47 a.m., he waits with it. The first signs of disturbance it began with the bookshelf. A few days after Lena first acknowledged the 2:47 phenomenon, she noticed a book lying flat on the floor. A history of Baroque composers, thick and dust-coated, was usually wedged tightly on the third shelf. She assumed it had simply fallen. Gravity, vibration, something explainable. But the next night, it was the candle, a slender, unused taper she kept on her kitchen windowsill for decoration. She found it laid neatly beside the sink parallel to the counter. Not fallen, but placed. Small things, always small, but not random. One morning, she awoke to find her bedroom door ajar. She always locked it. Always. She double-checked every night with a compulsive flick of her fingers. Yet now, it hung open, creaking slightly with the hush of windless air. She told herself she had forgotten. Told herself that the mind plays tricks, especially at night, especially when you're alone. but it didn't feel like forgetfulness. It felt deliberate. The shadows, too, began to stretch wrong. She would catch them shifting in the corners of her eyes, subtle elongations, like her own silhouette had begun to bend away from the laws of physics. One evening, as dusk slipped into ink, Lena sat in the living room with all the lights off. She watched the hallway without blinking. The old floorboards were visible under the soft moonlight, and she studied them for nearly an hour. Nothing moved. Until 2:47. A floorboard near the far end creaked, just once. Not the groan of cooling wood. Not the house settling. It was a specific pressure. A step. Lena froze, her breathing shallow. Her ears strained into the dark like a hunted animal's. No follow-up sound came, but the creak had happened. She felt the terror bloom not suddenly, but like a slow fog, thick, inevitable. "Is someone there?" she whispered. Silence, but that question so quiet, so human, seemed to wake something. From that night on, the disturbances increased. Nothing violent, nothing overt, just things not staying where they should be. A chair turned slightly askew. A picture frame, subtly tilted. Her toothbrush damp at 1 a.m. when she hadn't used it since morning. The mind can endure many things, but small inconsistencies, repeated and precise, start to unspool sanity, thread by thread. And Lena could feel her grip slipping. She was no longer sure if these were accidents or intentions. She began to record everything in a small notebook. Time, object, observation. She hoped that logic would calm her, that the written word would hold power over fear. But fear isn't afraid of ink. And at 2:47 a.m., something had started to answer. The sound that shouldn't exist the first time Lena heard it. She was brushing her teeth. It was late, around 1:30 a.m., and she'd forced herself to stay awake, determined not to sleep until sunrise. She leaned over the sink, half watching her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes looked hollow, her skin pale under the sterile glow of the bathroom light. She hadn't spoken to anyone in 3 days. Then came the sound, a whisper, faint, almost playful, like someone breathing words through a crack in the wall. She froze, toothpaste frothing in her mouth, head tilted slightly, listening. Nothing. Then again, clearer this time, just beyond the bathroom door. "Don't close your eyes." The words were not hers, not imagined, not a passing echo of memory. She hadn't thought them, she had heard them. She rushed into the hallway. Empty. Darkness, thick and silent. But something about the air told her she was not alone. After that night, the sounds returned more frequently. Never loud, never bold, just quiet enough to force her to question herself. Sometimes it was humming, low, tuneless, wandering, not from inside the house, but just outside the window, as if someone stood in the garden, head tilted up, watching the glass dot. Other nights, it was the sound of soft dragging across the floor. Not footsteps, not quite. More like a hand, heavy and dry, moving with sluggish intent across the old wooden planks. She began sleeping with earbuds in, but the sounds found her even through music. Sometimes, they were within the music. A voice, layered behind the melody, murmuring her name in tones only half human. Lena bought sound equipment, a digital recorder. She placed it in the hallway, where the floor had creaked weeks earlier. She'll let it run overnight. The next morning, she replayed the recording. For the first 6 hours, it was nothing but static, the occasional pop of old wiring, and her own footsteps retreating into sleep. But then at 2:47 a.m., the static dropped into a dead, suffocating silence, and something breathed. It was not the breath of an animal, or a human, or anything she could place. It was slow, deliberate, wet with decay. Inhalation, exhalation, right beside the microphone. Then, faintly, almost lost in the noise, "You let me in." She dropped the recorder. It cracked against the floor. The batteries spilled out, and still, the echo of that voice clung to her skin like invisible soot. She didn't remember letting anything in, but maybe it hadn't needed permission. Maybe it had always been here. Lena sat in the center of her living room, lights on, doors locked, eyes wide. Her heart beat fast, but everything else remained still. There is a special kind of terror in the idea that something wants you to hear it, that it whispers not to scare you, but to announce itself. And the message was getting louder. The presence. Without a face, Lena stopped turning off the lights. Every room, every hallway, every corner of her home remained drenched in artificial brightness. Her power bill was rising, but darkness felt like an invitation. An invitation she was no longer brave enough to extend. But light doesn't stop something that isn't made of shadow. It began with the mirrors. They no longer reflected what they should. Her reflection lagged only slightly, like a poorly synced video call. But enough. She tested it again and again, tilted her head, raised her hand, blinked, and in every case, her mirror image responded just a fraction of a second too late. Then came the cold, not environmental, not from draft or faulty insulation. This cold was precise, intentional. It moved. She'd feel it pass her shoulders, stop behind her, and linger. Not wind, not air, a presence. One without form, without sound, and most terrifyingly without face. It was always behind her, never directly seen, but its attention. She felt it like pressure, like static clinging to her skin. One night, unable to bear the uncertainty, Lena stood in the middle of her kitchen and said aloud, "Where are you?" Nothing responded, but every cabinet door creaked open in unison. Not fast, not violently, just slow, deliberate swings as if someone was choosing not to hide anymore. She slammed them shut, heart racing. But as she turned to leave, she saw something move in the corner of her eye. A flutter too low for a bird, too fast for a rat. She turned. The hallway was empty, except the hallway runner rug was no longer straight. It was folded slightly at the edge, as though someone had stepped on it. She started taking photos, dozens, a day. She placed objects in very specific ways, a teacup turned sideways, a matchbook resting on its corner, a pair of shoes misaligned, and documented them all. By the next morning, they were always adjusted, not drastically, just enough to prove that something or someone had passed through. Something clever, something that wanted her to know. She set up a small bowl of flour by the front door and around her bed. Childish, she knew, desperate, but that night sleep came too quickly. She hadn't meant to fall asleep at all. At 3:12 a.m., she woke up to the sound of breathing. It was deep, rhythmic, like the lungs of an animal, far larger than herself. She sat up slowly. The bowl of flour was visible in the dim hallway light, untouched, but her heart stopped when she looked to the foot of her bed. The flour was scattered there. Not footsteps, no, fingerprints. Long, trailing smudges like someone had dragged their hands through it, fingertips first, moving inward toward her mattress, and beside it, pressed gently into the floorboards, a handprint, only. It had too many fingers. Lena no longer questioned if she was alone. Now she wondered how long she had ever truly been alone at all. And worst of all, why had it chosen her? The unspoken warning. Lena no longer left the house. She told no one why. There was no point. She knew how it would sound, paranoid, unraveling, the early signs of something clinical. But the truth wasn't in her head. It was in the corners of her home, etched into the routine now wrapped around her like a noose. Each night, she remained motionless in bed, eyes fixed on the door, always cracked slightly. She couldn't bring herself to close it anymore. Somehow, he preferred it open. She didn't know if that made her safer or more visible. And every night, at 2:47 a.m., she felt the shift. The world would tilt, slightly, a sensation like gravity being adjusted, just enough to disorient. And always, the silence that followed, deeper than silence had any right to be, pressed down like something listening. Then came the patterns, The warning signs. It started with knocks. Not on doors or windows, but inside the walls. 3 soft knocks, pause, then 3 more. Always in threes. Like a rhythm, like a message. She tried ignoring them, then tried acknowledging them. But when she whispered, "What do you want?" into the darkness, the knocks changed. They became a beat. 3 knocks. A pause. 2 faster. Another. Pause, then silence. That pattern repeated the next night. Then the next. She wrote it down and circled it. A part of her began to treat this like a puzzle, a code, something she could solve and end. But something inside her, a voice she didn't want to claim as her own, whispered, "It's not meant to be solved. It's meant to be followed." Then, she found the photograph. It was lying on her pillow when she returned from the bathroom. A black and white Polaroid. The kind her grandmother once used. In the image, her hallway, as it looked now. Same rug. Same door. Same dim lamp glowing in the distance. But in the lower left corner of the photo, a shadow. Long, thin, almost man-shaped, but bent unnaturally, as if its limbs refused to behave like human joints. Its head was cocked toward the camera. Toward her, no face. Just void. She didn't own a Polaroid camera. She burned the photo in the sink, watched the edges curl, the shadow dissolve into smoke. But that night, the knocking stopped and was replaced by breathing. Not distant, not vague, close, beside her bed. She didn't move, didn't scream, and then something touched her wrist. Light, barely a graze, like the back of fingers brushing along her skin. She flinched, sat upright. Nothing was there, nothing she could see, but drawn in the layer of dust on her nightstand. In that same rhythmic code were 4 words: "Do not turn around." She didn't. Not that night, not for hours. And when she finally did, there was nothing behind her. Still, she knew, warnings don't come from nowhere, and he didn't want her to see him yet, which meant he would eventually. The moment of truth. Lena hadn't slept in 4 days. Not properly, not deeply, not without waking to sounds that didn't belong in a house meant for one. She ate in silence, bathed in silence, and listened, always listened to the strange quiet that had grown inside the walls like mold. She now moved through her home as though it were sacred ground, each step slow, reverent, wary of making noise that might disturb him. It was no longer fear of being hurt. It was the dread of being seen, because something had changed. She felt it in the air, in the coldness that didn't recede, in the invisible thread that pulled tighter around her each night as the clock crept toward 2:47 a.m. He was drawing closer. She considered leaving. She even packed a bag, but the moment she stepped outside, she felt it, a sudden hollowness, as if her house was watching her go. And then the car keys vanished. She found them the next morning on the kitchen counter, arranged in the shape of a question mark. That same day, she discovered the crawl space. It had been hidden behind a loose panel in the laundry room, a tiny square door, no more than 2 feet high. She could have missed it 100 times, but it was open now, waiting. Inside, a narrow tunnel, dirt walls, old boards for support, and at the very back, something wrapped in plastic. She should have called someone. Instead, she brought a flashlight. The tunnel reeked of damp earth and something else. Sweet, almost metallic. The kind of smell that warned of rot before rot became visible. She reached the bundle after what felt like a lifetime crawling. Her hands trembled as she peeled the plastic. Back. Inside were photographs. Dozens, hundreds of her, sleeping, cooking, sitting at the table, crying in the hallway, all dated, all time-stamped at 2:47 a.m., and some were from angles she could not comprehend, from above, from inside rooms that should have been empty. The last photo, paper-clipped to the stack, was different. It was of her standing in the crawl space. Now, taken from behind, the flashlight flickered. Lena turned. Nothing. No sound, just the tunnel. But she crawled out faster than her body should have allowed. She slammed the panel shut and pressed her entire weight against it, as if something on the other side might push back. It didn't. That night, she didn't wait in bed. She sat in the hallway, legs pulled to her chest, eyes trained on the crawlspace. Panel, breath held so tightly she felt faint. And at 2:47 a.m., the panel creaked. Not opening, not moving, just creaking, as though he was on the other side, waiting for her to make a decision to open it again, to let him in fully. Lena realized then, this was never about scaring her. It was about grooming her, conditioning her, bringing her closer to something. To him. She whispered, "What do you want?" Again, but the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was listening. Because silence, when it becomes intelligent, stops being silence at all. And then, from the walls, soft, almost childlike, came the answer. You already know. The inevitability of darkness. Lena didn't remember falling asleep, but she woke up to darkness, not the kind cast by the absence of light, but something thicker, denser, like ink. It moved with her breath and pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Her bedroom lamp, always left on, was off. No storm, no outage, just off. She reached for her phone. The screen was black, unresponsive, like it had drowned. Something had changed. The air no longer carried a chill. It was warm now, almost humid, as if something breathing, something larger than the room itself, was exhaling around her. She stood up, every joint feeling slower than usual. Not stiff, just reluctant. In the hallway, the familiar hum of the refrigerator was gone. The digital clock on the microwave blinked, static-filled. 2:47 a.m. Of course, but it stayed there, never moved, as though time itself had accepted what was coming. Lena knew. She had reached the point of no return. She no longer questioned if he was real. She no longer wondered what the sounds meant, what the whispers wanted, or why the crawlspace had been opened. Now, there was only one question. Would she face it? And something inside her whispered that facing it might be the only way to ever be free. The hallway was impossibly long tonight. Stretched doors that had never existed lined the walls, all of them slightly ajar. She could feel eyes behind them, watching, not blinking. As she passed, she saw faint movements, shapes that recoiled just before her eyes could lock onto them, not retreating in fear, just playing the game. She reached the crawlspace panel, open again, waiting. No flashlight, no phone, only darkness and a voice rising from within, like someone murmuring underwater, garbled but deliberate. Come see. She knelt, heart drumming so loud, it felt like a signal. Her fingers trembled on the edge of the wood. A warmth pulsed from inside the crawlspace, not inviting, not cruel, just expectant. Lena crawled inside, and the tunnel was different, no longer damp, no longer real. The walls seemed to breathe, closing in and pulling back in a rhythm that echoed her own lungs. Far ahead, a faint glow, not fire, not light, something alive. The space opened into a wide chamber she swore didn't exist beneath her house. In its center stood a figure, not a man, not a monster, just a shape, tall, disproportionate, endlessly wrong. Its head bent too far to the side, its arms slightly longer than they should have been. Its presence filled the space without needing to move. It had no face, but Lena felt its gaze, and then she understood he had always been there. Not in the house, in her, the photos, the whispers, the patterns, the warnings. They weren't leading her to him, they were leading her back to herself. He wasn't haunting her, he was awakening something dormant, something inherited, something that had lived in her blood and bone and breath, waiting for the right hour, the right awareness. And now, at 2:47 a.m., she had finally opened the last door. The figure extended its hand, not in invitation, in recognition. Lena reached back. The fear that stays Lena never left the crawl space. Not truly. The next morning her house was quiet in the ordinary way. The sun filtered gently through the blinds. The refrigerator hummed. Birds chirped outside her window. Indifferent. Everything seemed normal except Lena was no longer in the house. Not physically missing, just absent. Her shoes were by the door. Her coffee cup half full, still warm. The bed untouched, sheets neatly folded back as if she'd never returned to it. Neighbors said they hadn't seen her in days. The mail piled at her door. Her phone sat on the counter, fully charged, untouched. The police found nothing. No forced entry. No signs of struggle. No crawl space. Just a wall where the panel used to be. Seamless. Painted over. As though it had never existed. But sometimes, just sometimes, those who passed her house late at night reported something strange. A flicker in the hallway light. A shape watching from the upstairs window. A whisper, unintelligible, that buzzed in the ears like feedback, and always at the same time. 2:47 a.m. The house was eventually sold. A young couple moved in. They repainted, renovated, tore up the carpet, and replaced the windows. And then one night, the wife woke up to a knock 3 times. She checked the door. Nothing. Went back to bed. The next night, she found a photo on her nightstand, black and white, slightly blurred. It showed her husband asleep, taken from inside the closet, stamped at the bottom, in smeared ink. 2:47 a.m., she burned it, told no one, convinced herself it was a prank, a fluke. But later that week, she opened a drawer and found something buried beneath some old house documents. Another photo, this time of Lena standing in the same bedroom, same posture, same window behind her. Only her eyes were blacked out, not crossed out, not damaged, just gone, hollow. And in that moment, the new homeowner understood some houses are never empty. They simply wait, because he doesn't leave. Not when the clock resets, not when the story ends. He waits, in the corners, in the spaces between moments. And he comes at 2:47 a.m. Every single night, whether or not you're watching. Could you sleep after hearing this? What do you think really happened to Lena, and what was the figure in the crawl space? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you dare, explore another tale before bed. But don't forget to check the time first.